So I have this like super early memory from college. It was my freshman year, working in this research lab, and I barely knew anything about engineering or about life. Not that I know anything about life now, but I remember I was feeling really like insecure and worried that I wasn't smart enough to be doing the work I was doing at that moment, which was like super basic in hindsight. But nonetheless, I was feeling really like wigged out about whether or not I deserved to be where I was. And I talked to this guy who was this like super smart senior when I was a freshman, electrical engineer, and just turned out to be a great mentor later. This is kind of one of our first interactions with him, and I confided this in him, and he basically said that's called imposter syndrome, and in addition to that, get used to it. All good engineers have it. And in that moment, I kind of like remember ignoring that and being like, "Oh, okay, I guess this is normal," and just going on about my day and about my life. But over time, I was continuously reminded of this concept of imposter syndrome, but usually in a much more negative, much less normalizing uh, tone, right? I mean, it has syndrome in the name. So usually when we're talking about this syndrome, it's in the context of overcoming it, like it's something that we should leave behind or age out of, right? Um, but to be honest with you, I kind of never have. Um, I still have imposter syndrome. Like to this day, I have like over 2 years of work experience, and I like my job and I work with great people, and I'm treated with respect. And still, like I still have imposter syndrome there, and I don't really want to get rid of it. Like it's not really something that I feel like needs to be excised. Um, and yeah, I think it helps me. So that's kind of my hot take because I know like imposter syndrome can be a heavy subject. And to me, it kind of isn't. Like honestly, sometimes I perceive it as a good thing. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that today. So first of all, what is imposter syndrome? Well, according to the American Psychological Association, the imposter syndrome is an ongoing fear that you're going to be found out or unmasked as being incompetent and or unable to replicate past successes. It also says these fears can lead to feelings of anxiety and depression, lessen professional confidence and risk taking, and career burnout. So that is like super intense. And leads me to kind of two caveats about this discussion before we get into my main hot take, right? First of all, I do agree with that second sentence about um, lessen professional confidence, risk taking, career burnout. Like, I feel like imposter syndrome doesn't lead to a good career in engineering. Like, at the end of the day, you have to be able to present yourself well, interview well, be confident in what you and your team, if you're a leader, is capable of doing. So for your career, like I do think that imposter syndrome can be negative. I'm talking about the specific act of engineering, like when you're sitting down and doing technical work. That sense of imposter syndrome is what I am not looking to get rid of. Like I have systematically tried to root out the lack of confidence that makes me bad at interviewing or networking or presenting my work. That imposter syndrome I feel like can be really negative. But the technical flavor of imposter syndrome I've held on to, right? So being a good engineer, being good at engineering and having a good career as an engineer, not the same thing. And so that, honestly, I could make a separate video about in order to have a good career in engineering, you probably should get rid of imposter syndrome, right? So that's the first caveat. And the second caveat, I just want to make clear, the APA and other organizations mention that underrepresented groups in engineering, so like women or minorities or LGBTQ employees, are at a higher likelihood of having imposter syndrome, often because they're treated differently or if they're treated differently. And that's like super real and super unfortunate. And obviously, I'm not talking about that, right? No one should ever feel negatively at work based on discrimination. Discrimination is bad. That's not what we're talking about here. So those are my two caveats. So what am I talking about here? So when I specifically sit down at my desk to do technical work, whether it's like math on a pen on paper, coding, even like documentation for coding or a technical presentation. I know I was talking about presenting myself, but if the presentation is technical enough, it is still really engineering work. Technical work. I still feel a sense of imposter syndrome kind of in three main ways. The first one is, as much as possible, I try to assume that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about when approaching a new problem. Assume that the lessons I've learned are not a given or can even deceive me, right? And this is true at the micro scale of like debugging something and at the macro scale of starting something new. And I think that's a good thing. I have found that to be a strength where I know a lot of engineers, young and old, that learn how to do something one way and like never question the underlying assumptions, its optimality in what you're working on. Like, it's just the way you do it. And so we're going to do it again this way. And that is, like, in my opinion, the opposite of good engineering. And so, yeah, I think that feeling of uncertainty about what I know, and, unfortunately, because imposter syndrome is a mental thing, myself does lead me to question everything and really try to root out what's going on when I attack a new problem. And I think that's a good thing. So that's number one. Number two, it not only just motivates me in general, like to work fast and do good work, but it also motivates me to really learn the concepts, like the core of what I'm doing, right? So this is kind of like the opposite of what I just talked about. When I'm approaching something new, I assume I know nothing. But when I'm doing something new, I really want to capture as much knowledge as I can, right? And the reason is because, like, if I kind of squeak something through, like squeak out a solution, but don't really understand how it works or why it's the best or what the alternatives were or the decisions I made along the way, I'm less confident, right? I get that feeling of imposter syndrome of like, oh God, I'm going to get caught. I'm going to get caught taking the easy way out. And that, taking the easy way out, just kind of like scrounging together the first thing that works is usually not a good idea. It can be a good idea as a prototype, right? Like, obviously you want to, move fast and break things, but like in the long run, you don't want to accrue the technical debt of just kind of making, one single factor decisions one after another. Like, that's not a good way to operate. And so, yeah, like with each task I approach, I really try to make sure I internalize that knowledge, right? So it's kind of like I'm like gaslighting myself or something, where I'm constantly trying to internalize knowledge, but then when I approach something new, I assume I haven't internalized anything. Which, who knows? In certain ways, that could also make me a little more inefficient. Like, sometimes I catch myself kind of reviewing things where it's like, all right, like, I know what an FFT is. Like, move on. You got other stuff to do. I do catch myself doing that from time to time, but I like to err on the side of caution for mission critical stuff, right? And then lastly, this is probably the most like interpersonal aspect of this imposter syndrome. When I'm communicating my work or my ideas, it really forces me to like focus, like iron out my details. Like, by the time I'm presenting something or bringing a claim to someone, especially if I'm asking for help, dear God, if I'm asking for help, I get super nervous. But if I'm asking for help, like really iron out all the little details and the little decisions in what I'm presenting, right? I want to come to them like bulletproof, kind of for fear of like, they're going to, poke this or here's an obvious solution that I just look stupid for not having come up with. And again, like, that's not healthy, right? I have a pretty healthy work environment. And so on the occasion where I do just kind of miss a stupid solution or make a stupid mistake, like, I'm never reamed out for it, nor should I be. But like in the back of my head, that little imposter syndrome cog does kind of force me to really focus on the details of my work and be detail oriented in my presentation of it. And I think that makes communication and asking for help a lot more effective, right? Efficient and effective. I should really make a video about how to ask for help, because that's such a skill in engineering. I just thought of that idea as I'm recording this. Good. Anyway, it makes that interpersonal communication a lot more efficient and effective. And I get the answers I need sooner. Whether it's a stupid answer and I was like, oh God, I missed a hole to plug and I just kind of look like a dunce, or I iron everything out and we can get right to the deep seated issue that's difficult for anybody, right? So either way, it makes things more effective. So yeah, like I've kind of become friends with my imposter syndrome in a weird way. The other thing too is like I'm very early in my career. And so I don't have a lot of laurels to rest on. Like most of the laurels I have are kind of within college, right? So those 2 years of work experience, like the first of the two was internships and stuff that I did in between semesters. I've only really been out of school for 1 year, like working full time. And when you get into the real world, you realize like school experience is only so valuable. So I still have a pretty significant dose of imposter syndrome, but I'm really not in a rush to root it out because I think that some of the habits that lie downstream of it are actually really helpful in becoming a good engineer, which at this stage in my career, I really just want to get like damn good at my job. That's kind of the ultimate goal, right? Through more education or more work experience. So, yeah. So I that's my hot take, right? Like I think imposter syndrome makes for better engineers. Has made for a better engineer in my case. I'm no expert on the subject. I understand it can get pretty intense. And obviously, if it gets to a point where it's preventing you from functioning as an employee or as a person, that's not good, right? That's out of scope of what we're talking about. I'm just talking about like a healthy dose of imposter syndrome. Like maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am. Maybe I'm not as smart as my accomplishments make me seem. I should really like question the assumptions I make, the depth to which I'm capturing the things I'm exposed to, and the clarity with which I'm communicating the lessons I'm learning. That imposter syndrome has helped me in my career, and I intend to kind of lug it around with me as long as I need to. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. But agree or disagree, please comment, and subscribe. I'm trying to make YouTube videos about becoming a good engineer. I'm early in my career. I'm learning lessons and I'm questioning things. And I just kind of want to put it out there in the world. Hopefully you guys enjoy it and engage with it and we can all grow together. So thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.